Hello. This is Moonlit Inc. BL. Let the story begin. Chapter 1, The Blood on the Palm. The rain in the city didn't fall, it drowned. 10 years ago, Eman stood in a narrow alleyway behind a row of crumbling tenements, the scent of wet trash and ozone thick in the air. He was 19, shivering in a thin hoodie, holding a crumpled eviction notice and a transcript filled with failing grades. His life was a series of closed doors, and he was tired of knocking. "I know you're there," Eman had whispered, his voice cracking. He had followed a ritual found in a book that smelled of rot and old blood. "I don't want to be a failure anymore." The shadows in the corner of the alley didn't just move, they curdled. From the darkness stepped a man, or something shaped like one. He was dressed in a suit that looked woven from midnight, his skin a shade of pale that felt like moonlight on bone. 10 years, the entity had said. His voice was like silk sliding over a blade. "I am Jasper. I can give you the world, little bird. I can put the stars in your pockets and the wind at your back. You will be the envy of every man who ever looked down on you." "And then?" Eman asked, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "And then, I collect. A soul for a decade of perfection. A fair trade, don't you think?" Eman hadn't hesitated. He had held out his hand. Jasper's touch was freezing, a cold that bit down to the marrow. With a jagged obsidian blade that appeared out of thin air, Jasper sliced a shallow line across Eman's palm. "Signed in red, sealed in shadow," Jasper murmured. As their blood mingled, the alley vanished in a flash of white-hot heat. Present day. The ballroom of the Grand Metropole was a sea of shimmering silk and the clink of crystal. "To our youngest regional director," a senior executive toasted, raising a glass of vintage champagne. "Eman, I don't know how you do it. Everything you touch turns to gold. It's like you have a guardian angel." Eman forced a smile, the practiced, charming curve of his lips that he had mastered over the last 9 years. "Just dumb luck, sir. And maybe a bit of insomnia." The crowd laughed, a warm, inviting sound. His colleagues patted his shoulder, and his friends, the ones who used to mock his grades, looked at him with a cocktail of awe and bitter jealousy. Eman felt the weight of his Italian suit, the Rolex on his wrist, and the keys to the penthouse parked outside. He had it all. He was exactly who he wanted to be. But as he reached for a canopy, a sudden, sharp jolt of electricity shot up his arm. He hissed, nearly dropping his drink. He ducked away from the circle of admirers, retreating into the dim light of a balcony overlooking the city's neon sprawl. "It's just a cramp," he told himself. "Too much caffeine. Too much stress." He looked down at his right hand. The scar, the thin, silver line from that rainy night, wasn't silver anymore. It was glowing a dull, angry crimson. It felt like a hot coal was being pressed into his flesh. "No. No, it's too early," his mind screamed. He began to count, his breath coming in shallow hitches. He had kept a mental calendar, a ticking clock in the back of his skull for 3,000 days. "I have time. I should have months left. Why is it burning now?" He gripped the stone railing, his knuckles white. The city lights below seemed to flicker. For a split second, the reflection in the glass door behind him didn't show his own panicked face. It showed a tall, dark silhouette standing right behind his shoulder, leaning in as if to whisper a secret. Eman spun around. There was no one there. Only the muffled sound of the orchestra and the distant laughter of people who still owned their tomorrows. He looked back at his palm. The burning sensation settled into a steady, rhythmic throb, a countdown he could feel in his veins. The luck was curdling. The debt was coming due. 6 months, he thought, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. "I only have 6 months of air left." He touched the scar, his fingers trembling. He had lived like a king, but as he looked out at the vast, uncaring city, he realized he had never felt more like a ghost. Chapter 2, the shadow in the glass. The office on the 42nd floor was a cathedral of glass and chrome, but to Eman, it had begun to feel like a glass coffin. 2 weeks had passed since the gala, and the glitches were becoming impossible to ignore. It started with the electronics. His computer monitor would flicker, the sleek 5K display bleeding into static for a heartbeat, and in that gray noise, he would see the outline of a face, sharp cheekbones and eyes that held the cold vacuum of deep space. "Focus, Eman," he hissed to himself, rubbing his temples. He sat across from his legal counsel, Marcus, a man who charged $1,000 an hour to find exits where doors didn't exist. Eman hadn't told him about the demon, of course. He'd framed it as a predatory life insurance contract he'd signed in his youth. "The terms are unusual, Eman," Marcus said, flipping through the handwritten notes Eman had provided. "You're saying there's no buyout clause? No way to settle the debt with liquid assets?" "None," Eman said, his voice tight. He kept his right hand hidden beneath the mahogany desk, his fingers curled into a fist to hide the faint, rhythmic glow of his scar. "I need to know if a contract signed under duress, or by a minor, can be nullified if the creditor is unconventional." Marcus laughed, a dry, dusty sound. "Unless this creditor has a physical address and a tax ID, you're chasing ghosts. If you want to disappear, we can move the assets to a trust in the Caymans, change your name, and get you a new life in Singapore. But Eman, you look like you haven't slept since the Clinton administration. Who is this guy?" "He's not a guy," Eman thought, his chest tightening. "He's the reason you're wearing that silk tie. He's the reason I'm sitting in this chair." "Just a ghost from my past," Eman said aloud, standing up abruptly. "Look into the offshore transfer. Fast." That evening, Eman sought a different kind of counsel. He found himself in a dim, incense-choked shop in the city's outskirts. An old woman with eyes clouded by cataracts sat across from him, her hands hovering over a bowl of blackened water. "You smell of sulfur and ancient promises," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves. "I want out," Eman demanded, sliding a thick stack of bills across the table. "Tell me how to break a blood pact." The woman looked into the water and recoiled, the bowl splashing onto the table. The water didn't run, it pooled into the shape of a hand with a scar across the palm. "You cannot break what is woven into your soul," she rasped, her blind eyes wide with terror. "He is not following you, child. He is waiting for you. You are already his, you are just currently permitted to walk around." Eman bolted from the shop, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He sprinted toward his car, the cool night air stinging his lungs. As he fumbled with his keys, he caught his reflection in the car's tinted window. Behind his reflection, standing perfectly still under the flickering street lamp, was Jasper. He looked exactly as he had 10 years ago. He wore the same charcoal suit, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He wasn't menacing, he looked almost bored, like a hunter watching a deer exhaust itself in a fenced-in yard. Eman spun around, his back hitting the car door. "Stay away from me." The sidewalk was empty. Only the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of a plastic bag blowing in the wind answered him. "I'm losing it," Eman thought, sliding into the driver's seat. "It's the stress. It's the guilt." He checked the rearview mirror to pull out. In the reflection of the back seat, Jasper was sitting there, leaning back comfortably. "The Caymans are lovely this time of year," Jasper said, his voice a low, melodic hum that seemed to vibrate in Eman's very marrow. "But they don't have enough sun to burn off a debt like yours, Eman." Eman slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt in the middle of the empty street. He turned around, his breath coming in jagged gasps. The back seat was empty. Eman slumped over the steering wheel, a sob escaping his throat. He looked at his palm. The scar wasn't just burning now, it was itching, a deep, maddening crawl beneath the skin, as if something were trying to stitch itself back together. He realized then that Marcus couldn't help him. The psychics couldn't help him. The money he had worshipped for a decade was just paper. He had 5 months and 2 weeks left, and for the first time in 10 years, the youngest regional director felt like the terrified 19-year-old boy in the rain, realizing he'd traded his forever for a temporary throne. Chapter 3, The Flight. The private jet sat on the tarmac, its engines whining like a tethered beast. Eman didn't wait for the stairs to be fully lowered before he was ascending, a single leather duffel bag gripped in his white-knuckled hand. "Change of plans, Captain," Eman barked as he stepped into the pressurized cabin. "We aren't going to the New York conference. Take us to the coast. Oregon. The remote strip near Coos Bay." "Sir. We don't have a flight planned for." "I'm paying for the fuel and the fines," Eman snapped, slamming the door shut. "Just fly." As the plane climbed through the clouds, Eman collapsed into a cream-colored leather seat. He tore at his tie, tossing it aside. He felt like he was vibrating. He had spent the last 48 hours liquidating what he could: untraceable diamonds, stacks of cash, offshore accounts. He figured that if he stayed in constant motion, if he crossed enough state lines and bodies of water, the tether might snap. He was a man of logic, of security protocols. Every system had a lag. Every predator had a range. He leaned his head against the cold oval of the window. Below, the world was a map of tiny, insignificant lights. "I can outrun this," he whispered to himself, a mantra against the rising tide of his own heartbeat. "He's a shadow. Shadows need a surface to land on. If I stay in the air, if I stay on the move." His palm flared. A sharp, rhythmic pulsing that matched the strobe lights on the wings of the plane. Eman closed his eyes, drifting into a shallow, feverish sleep. He dreamt of the alleyway, but this time, the rain was made of ink, staining his skin until he was entirely black. The villa in Oregon was a brutalist masterpiece of concrete and glass, perched on a cliffside where the Pacific Ocean churned into white foam against jagged rocks. It was isolated, miles from the nearest town. Eman had bought it through a shell company years ago, black site for a rainy day. It was pouring now. A real Oregon deluge that turned the world gray. Eman paced the length of the living room, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of nothing but the abyss. He had checked every corner. He had salted the thresholds, a desperate act of a man who didn't believe in God but was starting to believe in the devil. He poured himself a glass of neat bourbon, his hand shaking so violently the glass clinked against his teeth. "You're late," a voice said. The glass shattered. Bourbon and shards of crystal sprayed across the polished concrete floor. Eman spun around. Jasper was sitting in a mid-century modern armchair that had been empty a second ago. He looked perfectly at home, crossing one long leg over the other. In his hand, he held a glass of the same bourbon Eman had just dropped, only Jasper's glass was intact. "The Oregon coast is a bit cliché for a hideout, don't you think?" Jasper remarked. He swirled the amber liquid, watching the alcohol slide down the glass. "Too much mist. Too many brooding vampires in the local cinema. It lacks the elegance of your penthouse." "How?" Eman gasped, backing away until his heels hit the glass window. The cold of the storm outside seeped through the pane and into his spine. "I traveled 3,000 miles. I changed my name on the manifest. Eman," Jasper interrupted, his tone almost pitying. He stood up, and as he moved, the shadows in the room seemed to stretch toward him, like iron filings to a magnet. "You didn't travel anywhere. You carried me here in your marrow. I am the silence between your breaths. I am the itch under your scar." Jasper walked toward him, his footsteps making no sound on the concrete. He stopped just inches away. Eman could smell him now, not sulfur, but something colder. The smell of old parchment and the ozone that lingers after a lightning strike. "You've spent a week's worth of your life on planes and in panic," Jasper whispered, reaching out a pale hand. He didn't touch Eman, but the heat from his hand felt like a furnace. You have 90 days left, little bird. Do you really want to spend them sweating in a concrete bunker? Eman sank to his knees, his face buried in his hands. The defiance had drained out of him, leaving only the hollow, aching terror of a trapped animal. I don't want to die, he choked out. I did everything right. I worked. I succeeded. I'm finally, someone. You are someone because I allowed it, Jasper reminded him gently, tilting Eman's chin up with a single finger. The touch burned. The contract is absolute. The debt is due. And no amount of salt on the floor will keep the darkness from coming home. Jasper vanished into the gray light of the storm, leaving Eman alone in the vast, echoing house. Eman looked at his palm. The scar was no longer just a line, it was a door, and it was opening. He realized then that he couldn't run. He couldn't hide. If he wanted to survive, he had to stop being the prey and start being a partner. He had to negotiate one last time. Chapter 4, The Impossible Bargain. The silence following Jasper's disappearance was louder than the crashing waves below the cliff. Eman stayed on his knees for a long time, staring at the shattered glass on the floor. The bourbon was soaking into the hem of his expensive trousers, a dark stain that looked like spreading ink. He was tired. The kind of tired that reached past the muscles and into the spirit. He realized then that his perfect life had been a 10-year sprint toward a cliff's edge, and he had finally run out of ground. Jasper. Eman shouted into the empty, cavernous room. I know you're listening. Show yourself. The air shimmered, and the temperature dropped until Eman's breath hitched in a pale plume of frost. Jasper materialized by the fireplace, leaning against the mantel with an effortless grace that made Eman's heart ache with a strange, bitter envy. More screaming? Jasper asked, his voice smooth and disinterested. It's a bit beneath a regional director, isn't it? I want to make another deal, Eman said, scrambling to his feet. He wiped his face with his sleeve, trying to reclaim some shred of the dignity he'd spent a decade building. Name your price. Double the soul. 100 years of service in whatever hell you come from. Just, not now. Not yet. Jasper's eyes, usually as dark as polished obsidian, flared with a faint, violet light. You humans always think more is a currency we care about. I told you, Eman. The law is old. One soul, one life. You cannot give me what I already own. And you cannot make a new deal with another while my brand is still warm on your skin. There has to be a loophole. Eman stepped forward, his eyes wild. You've been watching me for 10 years. You know me. You know I'm not ready. No one is ever ready, Jasper said simply. That's what makes the harvest so vibrant. Eman looked at the demon. Truly looked at him. Jasper wasn't a monster with horns, he was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous, like a razor blade hidden in silk. A desperate, insane thought flickered in Eman's mind. If he couldn't outrun the demon, maybe he could pull him into the light. 1 month, Eman said, his voice dropping to a low, steady hush. Jasper tilted his head, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. You want to bargain for 30 days? After I just told you it's impossible. Not a bargain for time, Eman clarified, taking a step closer. He could feel the cold radiating off Jasper, but he didn't flinch. I'll go with you. On the final day, I'll walk into the dark without a single word of protest. But for the last month, I want you to stay. With me. Here. Jasper's eyebrows rose. You want a demon to be your roommate? No, Eman said, his pulse thundering. I want you to be my partner. Live with me. Eat with me. Go on dates. Show me what it's like to have someone who actually stays. I spent 9 years with people who only loved the money you gave me. For once, I want the source. Eman knew it was a ruse. In his head, he was already thinking, if I can make him feel something, if I can make him hesitate, maybe the bond will change. If a demon can love, maybe he can't kill. Jasper stared at him, his gaze so intense it felt like he was peeling back Eman's skin to read the thoughts underneath. A long, agonizing minute passed. Outside, the storm shrieked. "You think you're clever," Jasper whispered, moving so fast he was suddenly inches from Eman's face. He reached out, his cold fingers tracing the line of Eman's jaw. "You think you can trap a collector in the web of human emotion. You think if I love you, I'll let you go." Eman didn't look away. "Is that a no?" Jasper laughed, a sound like glass wind chimes. "It's a yes, little bird. Not because your plan will work, but because I'm curious. I've seen men pray, I've seen them kill, and I've seen them hide. But I've never seen one try to seduce his own executioner." Jasper's hand moved from Eman's jaw to his scarred palm. He pressed his thumb against the glowing red line. The pain was sharp, but then it faded into a dull, comforting warmth. 30 days, Jasper agreed. "I will play the part of the devoted lover. I will walk in the sun with you. But understand this, Eman, when the moon rises on the 30th night, I won't be holding your hand. I'll be taking your soul." Eman nodded, his throat dry. "Deal." As Jasper stepped back, his form becoming more solid, more humanly vibrant, Eman felt a cold shiver of both relief and terror. He had bought 30 days. He had invited the shadow into his bed. Now, he just had to survive the honeymoon. Chapter 5, Domestic Demons. The first morning of their domesticity felt like waking up inside a beautifully constructed hallucination. Eman stepped into the kitchen of the Oregon villa, the air smelling of roasted arabica and expensive sea salt. Jasper was there, leaning against the marble island, wearing a charcoal turtleneck that made him look like a high-end architect rather than an ancient harvester of souls. He was reading a physical newspaper, the pages crisp between his long, pale fingers. "Good morning, Eman," Jasper said, not looking up. "I took the liberty of interfacing with your coffee machine. It was unnecessarily complicated." Eman blinked, leaning against the doorframe. "You drink coffee? I am a partner, am I not?" Jasper looked up, his dark eyes momentarily catching the morning light, turning them a deep, burnt amber. "It tastes like burnt beans and vanity. I can see why your species is obsessed with it." As the days bled into a week, the rhythm of their life took on a surreal, domestic quality. Eman had initially planned to use this time to find a weakness, a slip-up, a moment of demonic frailty. He watched Jasper constantly, waiting for him to glitch, to show a tail or a flicker of scales. But Jasper was perfect. Too perfect. He was attentive in a way that made Eman's previous lovers look like distracted children. When they went for walks along the rugged coastline, Jasper didn't just walk beside him, he watched the terrain, subtly moving closer whenever the wind threatened to blow Eman toward the cliff's edge. He listened when Eman spoke about his childhood, the real one, before the contract, with a stillness that felt like being truly seen for the first time. "Why are you doing this?" Eman asked one evening as they sat on the deck, wrapped in heavy wool blankets against the Pacific chill. "You could just sit in a corner and wait for the clock to run out. Why the effort?" Jasper watched the horizon, where the sun was dipping into the water like a hot penny. "If I am to collect a soul, I prefer to know the vintage. For 10 years, I watched you from the periphery. I saw your triumphs, your ego, your boardrooms. But here." He gestured to the quiet space between them, "I am seeing the man who was afraid of the dark in that alleyway. It's more interesting. You're always so close, but you never actually touch me," Eman noted, his voice barely a whisper. It was true. Jasper was always within reach, his presence a constant heat, yet he avoided skin-to-skin contact with a surgical precision. Even when he handed Eman a glass of wine, his fingers would recoil the moment Eman's hand took the weight. "Attachment is a heavy anchor, Eman," Jasper said, his voice dropping to a low, melodic hum. "I am a creature of the slipstream. If I hold on too tight, I might find I cannot let go when the tide turns. Eman felt a pang in his chest that had nothing to do with the contract. He had intended to manipulate Jasper, to make the demon fall for him as a survival tactic. But as he watched Jasper's profile against the twilight, he realized the terrifying truth: the ruse was failing because the feelings were becoming real. He wasn't just buying time anymore, he was falling in love with the thing that was going to kill him. That night, for the first time, Eman didn't dream of the ink-black alley. He dreamt of a man in a charcoal turtleneck, standing on a pier, waiting for a boat that would never arrive. Chapter 6: The Altar and the Heart. The 19th day arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. Eman decided on a whim, or perhaps a final, desperate test, to drive 2 hours inland to a historic stone cathedral tucked away in the valley. "You're sure about this?" Eman asked, gripping the steering wheel as the Gothic spires of the church pierced the fog. "I've heard stories about your kind and hallowed ground. If you're going to burst into flames, now is the time to mention it." Jasper, sitting in the passenger seat with his hands folded elegantly over a book of poetry, let out a soft, melodic huff of amusement. "Eman, humans built these structures with stone and sweat to reach a god they cannot see. Why would I be afraid of architecture? It is the intent that burns, not the mortar." When they stepped inside, the air was heavy with the scent of beeswax and centuries of prayers. The silence was absolute, save for the distant, rhythmic dripping of melting candles. Sunlight filtered through the massive stained-glass windows, casting vibrant shards of sapphire, ruby, and gold across the stone floor. Eman walked down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing like heartbeats. He looked at Jasper, expecting to see discomfort, or perhaps a flicker of the monstrous. Instead, Jasper looked at home. He stood beneath a towering depiction of the Archangel Michael, his pale skin catching the light until he seemed to glow from within. "It's beautiful," Eman whispered, leaning against a wooden pew. "I haven't been in one of these since I was a kid. I used to pray for things. Before I met you, I mean. And now?" Jasper asked, walking toward him. He stopped just outside a pool of crimson light falling from a martyr's robe in the glass above. "Now I just wonder if I'm already invisible to whatever is supposed to be up there," Eman admitted. He looked up at the vaulted ceiling. "The deal, the soul. I'm probably already crossed off the list, right?" Jasper looked at him, and for the first time, his expression wasn't one of detached amusement. It was something closer to mourning. "The universe is larger than your ledgers of good and evil, Eman. You think you are a stain. I think you are a masterpiece that was painted with a very short brush." Jasper stepped into the crimson light. He didn't incinerate. He didn't scream. He simply stood there, the red light bathing his face like blood. "You're not burning," Eman laughed, a sudden, hysterical sound that bubbled up from his chest. "We're in a house of God, and you're just standing there. I spent weeks thinking a crucifix would save me, and you're just enjoying the view." Jasper laughed then, a true, genuine laugh that reached his eyes. "I told you. It is the intent that matters. I am not here to desecrate. I am here with you." Eman's laughter died down, replaced by a sharp, localized ache in his chest. He reached out, his fingers hovering inches from Jasper's sleeve. "If you can stand here, in the light, why can't you stay? Why does the contract have to end in the dark?" Jasper's smile faded into something thin and sharp. He reached out and, for the first time, he didn't recoil. He tucked a stray lock of hair behind Eman's ear. His touch was no longer freezing, it was a searing, concentrated heat that made Eman's breath catch. "Because the light is a gift for the living, little bird," Jasper whispered, his voice echoing in the hollow space of the cathedral. "And my job is to ensure the balance. You had 10 years of the sun. Now, the moon wants its turn." Eman leaned into the touch, closing his eyes. He realized then that he wasn't looking for a loophole anymore. He wasn't looking for a way to live. He was looking for a way to make the end matter. As they walked out of the cathedral and back into the mist, Eman didn't look back at the altar. He only looked at the shadow walking perfectly in sync with his own. Chapter 7, The Last Sunset. The countdown had reached its final revolution. They had returned to the city, to the penthouse where Eman's perfect life had reached its zenith. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of a metropolis that looked like a circuit board made of diamonds and neon. But inside the apartment, the air was still, heavy with the scent of expensive scotch and the encroaching cold of the void. Eman stood by the window, his reflection ghostly against the glass. He wasn't wearing his suit today. He wore a simple, soft sweater, his feet bare on the heated marble floors. He looked like a man, not a director. I keep thinking about the charity papers, Eman said, his voice quiet. He didn't turn around. The apartments I bought, the stocks, the art, it's all just numbers on a screen. If you hadn't come for me 10 years ago, I would have struggled, sure. But I would have been real. Now, I feel like a dream someone is about to wake up from. Jasper was sitting on the sofa, a glass of amber liquid in his hand that he hadn't touched. He wasn't looking at the city, he was looking at the back of Eman's head. Everything is a dream, Eman. Some just last longer than others. The stars you see out there. Half of them are already dead. You're just seeing the light they left behind. You're no different. Eman turned, his eyes bright with a mixture of fear and a strange, newfound clarity. Is that what I'll be? A flicker of light? You'll be mine, Jasper said. The words weren't a threat. They were a vow. Eman walked toward him, his heart hammering, a frantic, rhythmic sound that seemed to fill the silent room. He sat on the edge of the coffee table, inches from Jasper's knees. I need to know. That month, the dates, the cathedral, the walks on the beach. Was any of it real for you? Or were you just a very good actor? Jasper set the glass down. The mask of the civilized collector finally cracked. A shadow seemed to bleed from his edges, making the room dim even though the lights were on. I have walked this earth since the first fire was struck in a cave, Jasper whispered, his voice vibrating in the floorboards. I have collected kings and paupers, saints and murderers. Most of them spent their final hours screaming or bargaining. But you. He reached out, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly. You invited me to dinner. You made me laugh in a house of God. You treated a monster like a man. He leaned in, the cold of his presence wrapping around Eman like a shroud. You asked if I was acting. A demon does not feel love as you do, Eman. We feel obsession. We feel the weight of the soul we carry. And yours is going to be the heaviest weight I've ever borne. Eman reached out and grabbed Jasper's hand, not tentatively, but with a firm, desperate grip. For the first time, Jasper didn't pull away. Their fingers interlaced. The scar on Eman's palm wasn't burning anymore. It was glowing a soft, steady white, like a dying star. I started this month to trick you, Eman confessed, a tear slipping down his cheek. I wanted to make you care so you wouldn't kill me. I was a coward. I know, Jasper murmured, his thumb stroking Eman's knuckles. I knew the moment you suggested it. But I'm not faking anymore, Eman said, his voice breaking. I don't want to leave. Not because of the money or the career. I don't want to leave because you're the only thing that's been honest in my life for 10 years. Jasper pulled Eman closer, tucking Eman's head into the crook of his neck. They sat there for hours as the moon crossed the sky, a mortal man and a timeless shadow, clinging to each other as the world turned toward the inevitable dawn. Eman closed his eyes, listening to the silence where Jasper's heartbeat should have been, realizing that the most beautiful part of his 10-year contract was the final 24 hours he wasn't supposed to have. Chapter 8, A Kiss to Close the Book. The sky over the city was turning a bruised, translucent gray, the color of a fading heartbeat. Eman stood on the balcony, the wind tugging at his hair. The city below was beginning to wake, headlights flickering like distant fireflies, thousands of people rushing toward a tomorrow he wouldn't share. He felt a strange, detached peace. The frantic terror of the last few months had burned itself out, leaving only a quiet, crystalline exhaustion. Jasper stepped out behind him. He no longer looked like an architect or a businessman. In the pre-dawn light, his features seemed sharper, more ethereal, his eyes two voids reflecting the infinite. "The sun is coming, Eman," Jasper said. His voice was no longer a hum, it was a tolling bell. Eman turned to him, leaning his back against the railing. "I have one final request. My lawyer has the papers, but I need you to ensure it happens. The assets, the accounts, the properties. Give them to the charity for the kids back in the old neighborhood. And make sure my mother is taken care of. Don't let the red tape eat it." Jasper nodded, his expression solemn. "Consider it done. Your legacy will be one of mercy, not just luck." Eman took a shaky breath, looking out at the horizon one last time. "How does it happen? Do you take my heart? Do I just stop?" Jasper moved closer, his presence drawing all the warmth out of the air. "A deal with a demon is sealed in blood, but it is harvested in breath. A kiss, Eman. That is the end of the thread. A final exchange of what was borrowed." Eman looked at Jasper's lips, the lips that had laughed in a cathedral, the lips that had tasted wine and spoken ancient truths. He realized he wasn't ready to die, but he was ready to belong to Jasper. "I thought I was so smart," Eman whispered, a small, sad smile playing on his face. "Trying to buy time with dates and dinners. But I think I just ended up making it harder for both of us." Jasper reached out, his hands framing Eman's face. His touch was no longer the biting cold of a winter grave, it was a profound, heavy stillness. "You didn't make it harder. You made it real. For 10 years, I was your shadow. For 1 month, I was your witness." Jasper's eyes shimmered with a rare, dark emotion, something that looked dangerously like regret. "I told you attachment was an anchor. I can feel the weight of you already." "Good," Eman whispered, reaching up to cover Jasper's hands with his own. "Don't forget me. Never." Eman closed his eyes and leaned forward. He didn't wait for Jasper to take him, he offered himself up. When their lips met, it wasn't the tentative, careful touch of the past month. It was a long, passionate, and devastatingly deep kiss. It tasted of salt and wood smoke and the end of the world. For a moment, Eman felt everything, the rush of his 10 years, the heat of the sun, the cold of the alley, the sound of Jasper's laugh. And then, he felt the tether snap. It wasn't painful. It was like a sigh escaping a crowded room. His lungs felt light, his heart gave one final, grateful thud, and the world simply faded to black. Jasper caught him. He held Eman's limp body against his chest, his head buried in the crook of the man's neck. For a long time, the only sound on the balcony was the wind. The demon, who had seen empires fall and stars die, stood trembling in the dawn, realizing that 10 years and 1 month was a cruel, infinitesimal blink of an eye. He carried Eman inside, moving with a tenderness that no contract required. He laid him on the bed, smoothing the sheets and closing Eman's eyes with a gentle touch of his thumb. "Rest now, little bird," Jasper whispered. A cold, familiar pull tugged at the edges of Jasper's consciousness, the sound of a new name being whispered in a dark corner of the world, another desperate soul calling out for a miracle. Jasper looked back at the bed one last time, his heart, or the shadow of one, heavy with a weight he would carry for eternity. Then, with a flicker of darkness, he vanished into the shadows of the room, leaving the perfect life behind to answer the next call.